Ralph wasn't a bad guy, but he was the kind of mall Santa who probably shouldn't have been one. After a few decades of hard living and a few too many bottles of cheap whiskey, he ended up wearing a Santa suit at Mary Pines Mall. His costume was a little off-kittered, his beard stained yellow from years of cigarettes, and his breath reeking of booze. The mall management turned a blind eye. After all, Ralph was cheap and he showed up every day. Eventually. But on Black Friday, Ralph came to work more than his unusual tipsy. He's been out all night celebrating the start of the season and had lost track of time. His eyes were bloodshot, his speech was blurred, and his cheeks glowed with more than holiday cheer. Most of the kids that came through that day were too young to notice or too scared of his rough appearance to care. Parents exchanged nervous looks but just wanted to get through the line and grab their overpriced photos and leave. As the day dragged into evening, the crowd thinned and Ralph was left in his big velvet chair nodding off. It wasn't long before the last straggling shoppers were gone and the mall grew quiet. Ralph's head lowered to the side and he drifted into a deep, drunken sleep. When Ralph awoke, the mall was pitch dark, cold, and eerily silent. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he'd been asleep for only a few minutes, but his watch told him it was well past midnight. The lights had all shut down, leaving only the faint green glow of exit signs casting shadows down empty corridors. A shiver ran down his spine, and he muttered to himself, "All hell locked in," his voice echoed, bouncing back with a hollow emptiness. Groggy and a little queasy, he tried to stand, only to realize he wasn't alone. First, it was a faint sound, barely more than a whisper, but unmistakably voices, childlike voices. He ripped around, squinting into the darkened mall, but saw nothing, just a vast, empty hallway stretching like silent rivers into the dark. Then, from down one corridor, a faint laughter, not joyous, but sharp, marking in far too high pitch. Ralph stumbled forward, squinting, his heartbeat quickening. As he moved towards the mall, strange things began to happen. Storefront mannequins shifted in their places, their limbs slightly turned, heads tilted at unnatural angles. Their blank plastic eyes following him every few steps. He swore he could hear faint little footsteps crawling behind him, only from the sound to vanish the moment he turned. He made his way to the center of the mall where the massive Christmas tree loomed, its ornaments swaying ever so lightly, though there was no breeze. As Ralph reached the tree, he stopped, heart pounding, because now he could see them. Children, ghostly children, gathered in a half circle around the tree, staring at him with dark, hollow eyes. Their faces were pale as if drained of life, their eyes glassy and vacant. Some were holding stuffed animals with stitched-on smiles that drooped in silent horror. "Santa," one of them whispered, his voice barely a breath. "Did you forget us?" Ralph stumbled backwards, his mind spinning. No, this isn't real," he muttered, his voice trembling. But the children stepped closer, their little hands outstretched, fingertips brushing the hem of his Santa coat, as if begging for something he couldn't give. He backed up, hitting the giant chair he had been sitting in all day, and collapsed into it, too terrified to move. "Do you remember us? Do you remember us, Santa?" Another child's voice asked, distant and echoing as though from the bottom of the well. Ralph's eyes darted around, searching for an escape. He knew now that there weren't just any children. They were the faces he had seen in old grainy newspapers, clippings, faded photos, and dusty frames at the back of the thrift store. They were children who had gone missing, their bodies never found, their stories forgotten by the mall crowds over the years. And here they were, drawn to him, the mall Santa, the spirit of their last holiday. We waited for you, Santa," said a girl with the dark, hollow eyes. Her dress was faded and tattered, hanging in tatters like cobweb. One by one, they climbed onto his lap, icy hands pressing against his arms and legs pinning him down. Ralph tried to scream, but his voice came out as weak gas, and their cold fingers clawed at his suit, and he felt the heat drain from his skin. As they whispered their stories in his ears, each one of them told him about the last moments of their lives, the terror and pain that lingered in his place long after they were gone. In his delirium, Ralph understood these children were bound to the Mall, trapped by memories of Christmas past, waiting for Santa to bring them peace. But Ralph wasn't the Santa they wanted. He was just the only one left. The whispers grew louder, voices filled with anger, sour, and despair. The darkness around the Christmas tree seemed to thicken, creeping closer until it swallowed Ralph whole. He could feel the coldness seeping into his bones, an overwhelming dread pulling him under. He was choking on it, drowning in it, unable to move as the children closed in. The last thing he saw was a small, icy hand reaching out to his face, gently closing his eyes. The next morning, the mall security found Ralph still sitting in the Santa chair, but he was unrecognizable. His face was frozen in a wide, horrified grin, his eyes wide open, staring into the darkness that lingered just beyond the glittering holiday decorations. The mall quickly replaced him, of course, hiring a fresh-faced young man to take his place in a Santa chair. And parents lined up their kids as usual, but now and then, late at night, the security guards still hear whispers by the Christmas tree, faint voices of lost children waiting for someone who have never and who would never come back.